It's October 6th, and the Cowboys lost. I'm so happy. I'm a Green Bay fan, but anytime the Cowboys lose, I'm very happy. So I'd throw that in. Don't hold it against me on evaluations. I am Superman. I would like this week I'm going to call kind of a little timeout. I want to spend a little more time on these three stages of intercultural awareness scale. I call it different things, and some of the labels are a little different, but I think you get the point of the three stages. And I got to catch up on some discussions I need to get back to you on. But for this week, I want you to read the third chapter in Banks. I'm going to do a video, and I'll put it up on Monday, tomorrow, later in the day. Also explaining Banks. But I'm doing this video now about the discussion. And the reason I want to slow things down is I want to go in deeper. You don't learn things unless you actually experience them and you emotionally have some depth, some what do they want to call that term? Some engagement to where something's at risk, So I have on the discussion and actually it's also in the discussion and the announcement with the assignment, as I talk about my own experience about thinking a long time ago when I was in elementary school, we used to make fun of kids that were different. If you didn't ever do that, bless you. I'm glad you never did that, but I'm just talking about sometimes people write about the cruelty of children. They don't know better, so they think everything's a joke, and it's not. But we live in an age now where people say things and do things that are very cruel, and they don't own up to them, and we don't, the truth has somehow eluded us, or eluded a lot of people. And so I want to, this week, I would like you to think back either in a situation in your own classroom right now or your school or sometime in the recent past or even in the distant past. I don't care. You can choose. I do want you not to use names, specifics. I don't want you to say we had a group of kids from this certain country here and this happened, because this is not a public forum. It's our class, but I want to protect you and the identity of the individuals. So you can dress it up a little, you can throw a curveball in there so it's not obvious, change the name or something. But I want you to look at the three stages and how either you may have behaved or how you may have been treated as an outsider, specifically, and then in there, because it talks about in the document talks about what people think in this stage, what people feel in this stage. The thinking is the cognitive, the feeling is the affective mode, AFF. And but then what do you do, or what could you have done, or what could have been done to make it a better situation? And the example I give in my own discussion is thinking back on this gentleman now who's in his 60s, but when he was a kid, they were farm kids and they were very poor. There was actually a group of pretty poor farm kids, and they weren't they smelled funny to us. They were out on the farm, but some of them didn't have the best hygiene. Some of them didn't have a chance. I remember some of the kids had very bad teeth. I would almost bet they were not nourished properly when they were very small. And now I think about how we'd say things about them and stuff that were incredibly cruel. I didn't even mention this, but there was one family that was so poor, our bus would go by their house and their house would be kind of torn down, like the outside. And I found out later they were tearing down the outside their house for heating fuel so they could stay warm inside because they were so cold. They were literally tearing off parts of the house and using it as wood because they didn't have they didn't have they had a stove and they had, I don't know what they were burning in it. But I mean, we're talking tremendous poverty, and that we did not understand anything about that. And I remember even some of my teachers, not all, but some of my teachers did not like these kids. They dismissed them. They didn't mock them, but everybody in class knew that some of the teachers didn't care for these kids. And we took their lead. We bullied because we felt, well, you know, if she doesn't like them, why do we have to like them? So this was a very disturbing acknowledgement, and I mentioned it in my statement there, how I found out years later the person kind of said on Facebook how he didn't matter to the teachers or to much of anybody. And then as an adult, and I realized that's the memory of the person when they were a child, and I was a child with them, and I wasn't helping the situation. I didn't know, but still, I'm ashamed, even if I didn't know. What can you do to how can you help in many ways? You know, I realize now we have social workers that will help with kids if it's a issue of nutrition, hygiene, any other negative things done to kids, if they need help, if they need to go to a dentist, if they have bad teeth, all kinds of issues that we now think about intervening. Back in the 60s, tough. People there weren't social workers in school. If kids came, they didn't have a coat, unless there happened to be a nice teacher or somebody that would recognize this, or a neighbor. They didn't get a coat. They just came to school without a coat. So now my focus, of course, in my background is English as a second language, dealing with people from different countries, people with an accent, people can't speak English. Those are groups. Some of you are in special education, you know that whole situation. I can attest that I had a relative from back in the 60s who needed special education. And that was when it was just kind of in its infancy as far as people actually being obligated. That I remember the school had SPED, but it basically amounted to one teacher taking the kids and keeping them in another room and teaching them as best they could, but just keeping them out of the classroom. Nowadays, that's totally unacceptable. Okay, and I struggle when I have English ESL. Now, I know sometimes I talk to you or I talk to other people and I find out, oh, you know, you're not ESL in this class. This is not an ESL class, but some of you may have situations where ESL kids are not given education or very little is done for them. People feel that, well, these people, you always hear that term, these people, that's always it. Those people, these people, that they're ignored. And that's the invisibility. That's the worst one. The first one, when you're denied your existence, that's the worst. But in your little statement in this discussion, how do you move people around? Because remember this, this is very important. In the first stage, when people are invisible, whether they're homeless or whatever, you want to educate and enlighten people that it's a moral obligation to acknowledge, it's a moral obligation to help them. It's the right thing to do to educate and not to ignore a situation where a child needs help or even an adult learner needs help. The second stage is the defense. That's the one we normally see on TV and stuff. You know, we want to build a wall. We want to block individuals. Remember that, what do you do there? You try to find commonality. You try to find a bridge. What is it I can do in this class to get this group of kids and this group of kids to learn to respect and interact with each other, rather than just lecture them on they need to be better people? There has to be an activity. There has to be interaction that can build, maybe eventually build friendships. Okay. I just want you to throw your 2 cents in there on that. And by the way, if any of you are doing this and you have any questions, email me or call me. You got my phone number. You can call me. Call me between 10:30 in the morning and 8 o'clock at night. Always text me ahead of time so I know you're not somebody trying to collect money from some bogus outfit from Omaha that's always asking for my credit card. Hey, would you please? I got one the other day. We're collecting money for the very always nice groups. I mean, either the veterans, firefighters, police, nurses, something like that, or some group, and they always ask for your credit card. They're so kind. Okay, then, so what is the solution? So what do people think? What do the people that are being discriminated against, how do they feel? How do they think? How's the situation to be helped? And then but I'm giving you the freedom on this discussion. You can go back in time. You don't have to talk about something in your school right now. You can go back and have a deep reflection, because I know if I could go back to the second or third grade back in 1963 or something in my hometown, that something could have been done. Somebody could have intervened. The teacher could have said something. The principal could have done something. It didn't need to be that way. And there were other situations with other kids. And I can tell you right now, I didn't see any special education kids in my school when I was in second grade because they were kept home. And the only kids I can even slightly remember was a little girl, I think, that may have had polio. So maybe it's polio, I don't quite recall, but I just vaguely remember this. And yet I know all those kids were there because not everybody was so-called normal, So where were those kids? I never saw that diversity in school, and certainly didn't see ESL at all. Finally, the third stage, which is the one where it's condescending, I call it condescending, or when you think that that person is just like you, but they look different or something's different about them, but the difference doesn't matter at all. So we want to respect differences. We don't want to eliminate differences, So how can you teach people to show respect for how other people may have different points of view? I put in there an example. Maybe there's a kid that was deeply religious in your school and was made fun of. Or maybe there was a person from a different religion that had some rules. I think I had a couple of students in my class that didn't do the Pledge of Allegiance. You know what I'm talking about. Joe Witness didn't do the Pledge of Allegiance, didn't take part in Christmas parties, which now are kind of not in vogue now. But there used to be a lot of parties in school, and either religious or festivals of some, or celebrating birthdays of somebody, and they didn't get to participate. Now I remember thinking how odd it was. I didn't know why, because no one explained to me. They had a different viewpoint. I wasn't enlightened about why they would be different. And so I just thought it was odd, and then some people thought it was very odd. So it was a point of feeling uncomfortable around them because something about them was different. So we're talking ultimately about the other, that otherness, that strangeness that we want to overcome. We know it's natural. All of these stages, by the way, are all naturally occurring. They're not evil, but there has to be an intervention to help change the situation. The defense situation, it's natural that people will become alarmed when they run into a group that's different than them. What do you do about that? That's the key. If you let the inclination of history and human nature is to often go to very negative actions, running people off, kicking them out. I can find these stages, these 3 stages. Actually, I want to mention there are 6 stages, but the other 3 are when you go over the hump and you're actually interacting in the other culture. And I haven't gone into that because in our culture, we generally don't become, there's some cultures where 2 cultures exist very closely together and they're different, but they respect each other. And that's a wonderful equilibrium. You see it in large cities, groups have settled next to each other. There's a certain set of rules and they kind of follow those. But I just work with the first three because these are the ones that are the most obvious. Anyhow, I'm going to put on another video about banks, chapter 3, but I'm going to do that tomorrow. Okay, so you got this one for now. And I hope this extra time is helpful. I can pound you with a lot of stuff, but I'm not just teaching facts. I want to teach critical thinking. And again, I want you to reply on at least 3 other people. I'm not real picky, but acknowledge other people in the discussions and their points of view. You don't have to methodically go through and reply to everybody, but at least peruse them, look through them, and do 3. I know you're very busy. You're teaching, and it's a little different. It's not like you're in college where most of your time is spent going to class and working a job on the side. Your job is during the day, and you have to take care of a lot of other things. So I'm trying to make this as palatable as possible for you. I am Superman and try to do my best. When I was a little kid, I used to pretend I was Clark Kent, but I didn't have glasses. But I'd put on pretend glasses. But it turned out, ironically, I was incredibly nearsighted. So I really had to wear glasses, and I was so happy to wear glasses. Other kids didn't like glasses, but I'd pretend I'm Clark Kent. So wearing glasses was cool because I was secretly Superman. Not really, I got bullied, but that's another issue. All right, good night.